Welcome everybody to today's session. Today I want to talk about the question, do you have an addiction, or is it a problem behavior, or what is it? As a counselor, when people come into counseling for addiction work, one of the big questions they have is, do I have an addiction? Am I an addict? Or if they're a loved one or a family member coming in to find out information because they have someone in their life that they think may be an addict or have an addiction, they also want to know this question. Is this behavior addiction behavior, or is it just problem behavior, or what is it? So that's what I want to talk about today and give you a good understanding whether you're looking in the mirror at yourself for your own behavior, or again, if you're a loved one or a family member wanting to know if someone's behavior is an addiction or not. And I want to approach this in two ways. The first way I want to talk about is from a clinical standpoint. And so I'm going to use the criteria for substance abuse from the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Manual for Mental Health Disorders that we use in the mental health field. And there's 11 criteria that I'm going to share and talk about when it comes to that. Then I'll also talk about, just as a therapist, and what I see, and maybe which one of those criteria tend to be more prevalent and which ones we need to look at more in depth. All right, so let's look at the 11 criteria for substance use disorder. Now, before we get into that, yes, these are the criteria for alcohol or drugs, but we can also use these for addictions like compulsive gambling, sex addiction, pornography addiction, video gaming addiction, food addiction. So we can kind of substitute the words that I'll be using for substance use for any other behavior that potentially can be addictive or in question whether or not it's an addiction or not. So again, with that being said, let's jump into these 11 criteria. 1. Consuming more alcohol or other substance than originally planned. 2. Worrying about stopping or consistently failed efforts to control one's use. 3. Spending a large amount of time using drugs, alcohol, or doing whatever is needed to obtain them. 4. Use of substance results in failure to fulfill major role obligations such as at home, work, or school. 5. Craving the substance. 6. Continuing the use of a substance despite health problems caused or worsened by it. This can be in the domain of mental health. Psychological problems may include depressed mood, sleep disturbance, anxiety, or blackouts, or physical health. Continuing the use of a substance despite its having negative effects on relationships with others. For example, using even though it leads to fights or despite people's objecting to it. 8. Repeated use of this substance in a dangerous situation. For example, when having to operate heavy machinery or when driving a car. 9. Giving up or reducing activities in a person's life because of the drug or alcohol use. 10. Building up a tolerance to the alcohol or drug. Tolerance is defined by the DSM-5 as either needing to use noticeably larger amounts over time to get the desired effect, or noticing less of an effect over time after repeated use of the same amount. And finally, 11. Experiencing withdrawal symptoms after stopping use. Withdrawal symptoms typically include, according to the DSM-5, anxiety, irritability, fatigue, nausea, vomiting, hand or tremor, or seizures in the case of alcohol. So there is the 11 criteria for substance use disorder according to DSM-5. Now, this isn't just black and white. You either have it or you don't. They also categorize it into 3 categories: mild, moderate, or severe. To have a mild substance abuse disorder, you have to answer yes to 2 or 3, but no more. So if you answer yes to 2 or 3, you probably have a mild substance use disorder. If you answered yes to 4 or 5 of these, then you have a moderate substance use disorder. If you answered yes to 6 or more, then the DSM-5 considers this a severe substance use disorder. So there you have the criteria to substance use disorder, whether it's mild, moderate, severe. And that's, again, specifically to drugs and alcohol. But if your potential addictive behavior, again, is something like the behavior addiction, such as gambling, sex, pornography, food, video games, then you can use these criteria along with that as well. You just may have to adapt it a little bit. So now let's look at kind of in the office what this looks like, or what I'm looking for as a therapist when someone comes in. The big criteria that I'm looking at is, have you or someone tried to stop more than once and failed to do so? Or you're really committed to stopping and you said, "I'm never again," and you start doing it again. If you do that, that's a good sign that this is a problem. If you keep doing your behavior or the alcohol or the drugs in spite of negative consequences, and you know it's causing a problem, but you keep doing it, there's another big criteria. Another one I find is people will come in and they don't think they have a problem, but yet everybody else in their life says it's a problem. Or one or more people have come to them or have come to you and says, "Hey, I think you have a problem with this or with that." You might want to start paying attention. If people start telling you they think you have a problem, that's a pretty good sign that this is an issue. Another big one is kind of like that one, that people notice it, but if in your significant relationships, especially in marriages or significant relationships or parent-child relationships, that it really starts to put a strain or drive a wedge between you and the other person, that's a really big indicator that this is a problem. And even if it's not an addiction, it's a problem because it's getting in the way of an important personal relationship. The final one I want to talk about as I look at in the counseling office is, what's the purpose? Why are you turning to this behavior? And what I find with addiction is, more often than not, is trying to escape an intense negative emotion or life experience. And if you haven't watched my 3-part series on understanding addiction, please watch those as well. But in one of those, it explains that addiction is just a symptom to a bigger problem. If you're at the level of, again, that this is an addictive behavior, my guess is this is a way for you to numb out and a way to just escape the world. But that's a good indicator when you look in the mirror and you go, am I doing this substance or this behavior, or am I drinking this much alcohol to numb out and to escape the problems of my life? And if I'm doing that, that's another good indicator that this is not a healthy coping skill. So there's some ideas on understanding of whether or not a behavior or a substance use is an addiction or not. Now, you may have other strong feelings and thoughts on what constitutes addictive behaviors or whatever. Another one may be, is it illegal? If it's illegal, then it's a problem in my book. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments section below. If you have any other thoughts on what constitutes an addiction, please leave those thoughts as well. If this was helpful, please subscribe to my channel. Please give it a thumbs up. And please share it with somebody who may be struggling with something. Until next time, make it a great day and make it a great week.